Now, if you ask any casual film and TV goer about reboots, remasters, or any other many would just roll their eyes at how a lot of our entertainment revolves around redoing older films and better stories. I myself have watched remakes that disappointed me, and they do highlight the problems with Hollywood today. It's sad to see, although there is some merit to this, as it introduces a new audience to a well-beloved piece of media, and if they choose, they can revisit the older version to see what the crack is all about. I mean, if they want to, that is. Mind you, this can vary depending on the story, and I feel there have been more negatives than positives. However, some of the better remakes have shown to be really good, while also resonating with both the old and new fans. An example that comes to mind is Trigun Stampede, which was a polarizing series when it dropped last year. I remembered seeing so much ire from the OG Trigun fans who believed they were destroying a popular franchise. These complaints ranged from the art style, the story not being a one-to-one adaptation, and the fact that Vash sported an unusual look which made people roll their eyes. Now, as someone not familiar with Trigun, I was able to watch this without the nostalgia goggles, and to be honest, I like this series. It's actually one of my favourite shows from last year, so it was a shame seeing a poor reception at first. But as the episodes went on, you start to see that the studio involved are huge Trigun fans, and while the series would strive to do something new, it was also a love letter for the old fans. It was able to win a loyal audience, as both new and old fans could come together to enjoy this new series. This shows how in the right hands, a remake can bring the best of both worlds, giving the old fans something to enjoy while introducing themselves to a new audience. And really, Hollywood can learn a lot from Trigun. Yeah, remakes are a mixed bag and you don't see a lot of it in the anime sphere, but we have seen news of them popping up and they may be coming in the future. Please don't suck. But that won't be for a long time, so why don't we stick to now, because there's a remake I really want to talk about. Spice and Wolf, Merchant Meets Wise Wolf is a fantasy anime with a slight twist to the usual formula. Now this is a series with a history, as it started life as a light novel written by Isuna Hasakuna and was published by ASCII Media Works in 2006. Since then, the series has gained critical acclaim, having sold 5 million copies in 2020 and has spun numerous media franchises, such as the manga series that had been going on for a decade, as well as numerous video games from dating simulators to a VR game. But of course, along with all that, there was the anime released back in 2008, and like the light novel, gained critical acclaim. So I wouldn't say I'm too familiar with this series. I mean, the first time I learned about it was watching a dual screens video on the VR game, which they weren't too fond of, but I found the anime intriguing with the way they talked about it. I mean, a series featuring a cute anamorphic anime girl with a focus on economics? That's quite the setup. Honestly, I was a bit skeptical starting the series, because really, I don't like economics. I mean, it's just something that I just can't get my head wrapped around for some reason. Like, I watched the ending of Trading Places like 10 times, and it took me that long for me to understand what the hell was going on. And even now, I still don't have a full idea of how it works. Also, it's a great film, so you should check it out. However, just because I get confused doesn't mean I can't enjoy it. So I will be looking at the remake, and from what I've seen, it seems to be a one-to-one story, albeit with a few changes. Maybe because the story got further in so they can fill in those details. But without further ado, let's get into this remake of Spice and Wolf. Ow! That was awful, wow. So we begin this story in this familiar countryside in an unfamiliar world, where we see people living their lives as they stick to whatever traditions they hold. But on the main road, we meet Kraft Lawrence, a travelling merchant delivering fur pelts, while also trying to make a living in this ever-changing world. As an outsider, Kraft keeps to himself, but finds these dying traditions amusing, since the church in this world has gained a lot of notoriety, and in turn, many pagan traditions have begun to fade. It's a sad state of affairs as time waits for no man, and after the villagers complete this celebration, Kraft goes on his way to his destination. But on the road, Kraft stops off for the night in the woods. He checks his pelts to make sure everything is okay. However, he finds that he's taken on a stowaway, like none that he's ever seen. Wow. And so the travelling merchant meets the wise wolf, who decide to travel together as Craft makes his way through these unusual lands, while he takes Hollow back to her home now that her work in this world is done. You know, when I finished the episode, the first thought that came to my mind was, Frieren? Yeah, it's weird how I drew that comparison. I mean, Frieren is quite different to Spice and Wolf in certain characteristics, but the pacing of the journey is almost identical. I mean, in Frieren, we understand that this quest is important for most of these characters, but the pacing of the journey is slow, as we see the party go to each location with ease, and we see how this antisocial group deals with new experiences. Sure, you could say how boring it is, but in a way, it shows how grand this journey is, as it will span for years. Spice and Wolf is a similar idea, as we are following these characters on this epic journey, and it is not one filled with action for the most part, as they will need to stop off at different cities and deal with any problems they have on the way. And the pacing is also quite slow, as we get to experience everything in this world has to offer. I think pacing can be put on a diagram, because the pace dictates how the story is told. Recently I finished Chainsaw Man, and the pace was breakneck, so it will be on the far right, as the action is so engrossing and the story flies by quickly that it's so engaging, oh my god. Meanwhile, JoJo Part 3 has a quick pace, but not as quick as, let's say, Chainsaw Man, as it lets characters breathe, so while it would be on the right, it wouldn't be on the extreme end like Chainsaw Man. But on the other side would be Frieren and Spice and Wolf, as the pace is much slower. Now of course, everyone will have their opinion on pacing. Some will find the slower pace boring, while others find the quicker ones too rushed. But shows like these find the best of both worlds in this odd balance. And Spice and Wolf is exceptional, so if you're sad about Frieren ending, you should check out this show because it will fill that void. But like I said, as the show is much slower paced, it allows me to marvel at a lot of the finer details, such as the amazing dialogue between the main characters. You know a story is special when you can tell the dialogue is different than all the other shows you watched, and the conversations between Craft and Hollow are some of the best I've ever seen, since you have two characters on the road for a long period of time, and frankly, there's a lot that can happen on the road with two people, especially a man and a woman. No, not that. You just have a lot of conversations, okay? But I have to admit, I enjoyed watching these two talk. Despite being centuries old, Hollow is quite rowdy towards Craft as she teases him constantly, while Craft is a mature stoic traveller, taking everything she does by stride. Although there are times when she can throw the poor man for a loop, but you can see the mutual respect the two share for each other. Many of their conversations feel almost natural, like you would see when a group of friends talk to each other for a long time. And there were times when even I got swept up in their conversations. You know, there was this moment in the show that stuck out to me, as it was during their travels and Hollow got a bit cheeky and talks about how awesome wolves are. However, Craft has a bad history with them and finds Hollow's bragging really unsettling, and eventually he lashes out and tells her to stop. This surprises Hollow, who sees how hurt Craft is and apologizes for taking it too far, and for a few scenes they sit in silence in complete awkwardness, until Hollow resumes her chatter and the two go on their banter. And it was here when I realised that this anime was something special in terms of the dialogue, and I was looking forward to scenes where they're together, as this is where we see them interact the most. However, that's just the start compared to the meat of the anime, something that makes it incredibly unique. That's right, I'm talking about the economics. Ah yes, the thing that makes this series stand out from most fantasy shows, and for good reason too. How can you make a show that revolves around money without it getting too boring? Well, this show does exceptionally well, as we see how people will profit in a world that is constantly changing. One of the first plot points we get introduced to is the value of coins changing, which will lead to some people getting rich and others being worse off. Unfortunately, this is very reminiscent of the real world, but in this story so far, we see our characters embroiled in this conspiracy involving a rival merchant company that wants to make a profit, and they'll do anything to ensure their schemes continue, even if it means killing people. This is quite a fascinating way to look at political intrigue, as it feels like something out of an epic fantasy novel like Game of Thrones, what with how these characters maneuver on this chessboard. It's been a long time since I've seen a unique anime fantasy setting, which is a shame because most isekais tend to be based off RPGs or Final Fantasy. Of course, epic fantasy authors have been known to do this as well, but it's so refreshing to see a new perspective in this. And to me, Spice and Wolf is a great example of a fantasy anime, but now that I say that, I just realised this anime is quite accessible. Yeah, for those really into anime, it's safe to say that anime isn't the easiest medium for people to get into, frankly because of the characteristics that make anime off-putting or even cringe to certain people. And as much as I like anime, I can only count on one hand the number of shows that is accessible to a casual watcher. Shows like Spy Family, Death Note, or any Studio Ghibli movie are the exception because it doesn't fall into the typical anime tropes or put off the audience by its content. And Spice and Wolf is another show that is accessible to a wider audience because it doesn't utilise those tropes, which is funny considering Hall is plastered everywhere in media, because Best Girl. Even so, she does not fall into those tropes you would expect, and sure she has a wicked side to her, but her character is well developed and is not sexualised by this anime. Well, not how you normally think. She's quite the brains and her treatment in this anime is amazing. It has all that is needed to become a gateway anime for those who want to watch more from the medium without being put off by the worst side. A show that does that can rival any popular shonen, and Spice and Wolf is the perfect example of this, honestly. Spice and Wolf is a one-of-a-kind anime, and after all the hype, I am happy to say that this show lives up to it. Of course you'll have the old fans who will prefer the older version, but I think this show does a good job to be approachable to the older fans, while introducing new fans like myself. I mean, the original anime was on my list, but this show gives me a good excuse to get around to it, and it only makes me more excited to watch the 2008 anime, just to see what's different. It was the same for Trigun Stampede. I loved that series, and it made me more intrigued by the original. And that right there is the power of remakes, when it's made by people who love the source material. But this show deserves 2 thumbs up, and I hope this show continues to be awesome, because I am hungry for more. What was that?